The sun had barely risen over the tranquil mountains, casting a soft golden hue upon the ancient monastery. Mist lingered in the valleys below, and the crisp morning air carried the scent of pine and earth. Birds chirped in the distance, and the gentle rustling of leaves created a peaceful melody. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the outside world, where time seemed to slow down, allowing the heart and mind to settle. Deep within the monastery walls, an elderly monk, Master Lin, sat in quiet meditation. Draped in simple robes, his presence exuded an unshakable tranquility, as if he were one with the stillness around him. Over the years, many seekers had traveled to this sacred place, drawn by the stories of his wisdom. They came seeking answers, solace, and clarity, hoping that in his words they would find direction. Among them was Daniel, a young man burdened by the chaos of modern life. His thoughts were a whirlwind of anxieties, his heart weighed down by confusion and frustration. Sleepless nights had left dark circles beneath his eyes, and the weight of his struggles made his steps heavy. He had heard of Master Lin's guidance, and, in a desperate search for peace, had journeyed far to reach this secluded monastery. As he approached, he found the elderly monk seated beneath a towering oak tree, its ancient branches sprawling like protective arms. Master Lin's eyes were half closed, his expression serene, as though he was listening to something beyond the realm of sound. Daniel hesitated before speaking. "Master Lin," he began, his voice betraying his uncertainty. "I have come seeking answers. My mind is restless, and I do not know how to find peace." The old monk opened his eyes, their gaze deep and knowing, as if they could see past Daniel's words into the very essence of his turmoil. He gestured for Daniel to sit beside him and waited a few moments before responding. "The world is filled with noise," Master Lin said finally, his voice calm and measured. "But true wisdom is found in silence." Daniel furrowed his brows. "Silence? But how can silence help me when my problems demand solutions? When my thoughts won't let me rest?" Master Lin chuckled softly, the sound like the whisper of wind through leaves. "The mind, like a restless river, does not find clarity by stirring its waters further. Let me tell you a story," he said, "a story about the moments when silence holds more power than words." With that, the monk adjusted his robe, took a deep breath, and began his tale. A journey of self-discovery, patience, and the profound wisdom hidden within the quiet moments of life. When you're angry. 500 words. Master Lin looked at Daniel and smiled knowingly. "Anger is like a fire," he said. "Left unchecked, it spreads, consuming everything in its path, including the one who holds it." Daniel listened intently as the monk continued. "There was a time when I, too, struggled with anger. In my early days at the monastery, I was quick-tempered, always feeling the need to defend myself when challenged." He paused for a moment, remembering. "One day, an older monk reprimanded me in front of others, accusing me of arrogance. I felt my blood boil. Without thinking, I raised my voice, responding sharply, proving my point. But instead of satisfaction, I felt an emptiness afterward. The room had grown cold, the air thick with tension. I had won the argument, but lost something greater. Peace." Master Lin took a deep breath. "That evening, my teacher found me sitting alone. He placed a small, glowing coal in my palm and said, 'Hold it as long as you can.'" Daniel's eyes widened. "Didn't it burn?" "Yes." Master Lin nodded. "The pain was immediate. I dropped it within seconds." His teacher had smiled gently. "You see?" he said. "Anger is like this coal. When you hold onto it, hoping to throw it at another, you are the one who gets burned first." Daniel absorbed the words, deep in thought. Master Lin continued. "From that day forward, I understood that silence in moments of anger is not weakness, but wisdom. When we speak in anger, our words become weapons, wounding others and ourselves. But if we pause, breathe, and embrace silence, we allow the flames to die down. Only then can we respond with clarity and compassion. He gestured toward the oak tree beside them. Nature teaches us this lesson too. A storm does not last forever. The wind howls, the rain pours. But then, stillness. If we can be like the tree, standing firm and unmoved in the storm of anger, we will not be controlled by it. Daniel sighed, reflecting on his own life. How many times had he spoken out of anger, only to regret it later? He clenched his fists, then slowly released them. So the next time I feel anger rising, I should be silent. Master Lin nodded. Silence gives you time. Time to understand your emotions. Time to see the situation clearly. And most importantly, time to choose kindness over conflict. Daniel smiled faintly. I will try. The monk patted his shoulder. That is all we can ever do. Try. And in time, silence will become your greatest ally. When someone is venting, 600 words. Master Lin sat quietly under the shade of the ancient oak tree, his hands resting gently in his lap. The breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, and the distant hum of the monastery bells resonated through the tranquil air. Daniel, still reflecting on the lesson about anger, shifted on the wooden bench beside him. Master Lin, he said hesitantly, what about when someone else is angry? When they come to you full of frustration and pain? Should I remain silent then too? The old monk smiled. Ah, an important question. Let me tell you another story. Years ago, when Master Lin was still a young monk, one of his fellow monks, Brother Wei, had suffered a great disappointment. A respected teacher had overlooked him for an important task, choosing another monk instead. Brother Wei was devastated, and his resentment grew each day. One evening, as Master Lin sat by the monastery's koi pond, Brother Wei stormed over, his face flushed with frustration. It is unfair, he declared. I have worked just as hard, if not harder. Why was I not chosen? Master Lin remained silent, watching the gentle ripples in the pond. Brother Wei continued his rant, pacing back and forth, his voice rising. With each word, I have given everything to this place. I have followed every rule. And yet, they ignore me. Tell me, Lin, do you not agree that this is unjust? Lin did not immediately respond. Instead, he simply gestured toward the pond. Look at the water, Brother Wei. Confused, Brother Wei stopped pacing and glanced down. The surface was disturbed by his movements, rippling in chaotic circles. When you throw a stone into the pond, Master Lin said, it creates waves. The harder the stone is thrown, the greater the disturbance. Brother Wei frowned. And what does that have to do with anything? Lin continued, his voice steady. When someone is filled with emotion, anger, frustration, sorrow, their mind is like this pond. The ripples of their distress spread outward. If another person throws in their own stone by arguing, by giving advice too soon, they only create more waves. But if one remains still, simply present, the water eventually calms on its own. Brother Wei's shoulders dropped slightly. So you are saying, I should say nothing? Master Lin smiled gently. Not nothing, but not everything either. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is your silent presence. To listen without judgment, to let them express their pain without interruption. People often do not need solutions right away. They need to feel heard. And when they have spoken, when their storm has passed, then, and only then, is the right moment to offer wisdom. Brother Wei sighed deeply, his anger softening. I see. You would not tell me what to do. You would let me find it myself. Lin nodded. When the water is still, it reflects clearly. When the heart is calm, it sees its own path. Daniel exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he had been holding on to. I think I understand, he murmured. When someone vents, they don't need me to fix things immediately. They just need me to listen. Master Lin patted Daniel's shoulder. Yes, be the stillness, not the storm. You will find that, more often than not, silence speaks louder than words when someone is trying to manipulate you. 600 words. Master Lin sat in peaceful contemplation, watching as the wind played gently with the leaves. Daniel, still processing the last lesson, leaned forward, a troubled look crossing his face. Master Lin, he began hesitantly. What if someone isn't just venting, but trying to manipulate me? What if they twist words to get what they want? The monk smiled knowingly. Ah, manipulation, a tool often used by those who seek control rather than truth. Let me share a story with you. Years ago, before Master Lin had attained his position of wisdom, he encountered a traveling merchant who had stopped at the monastery. The merchant was well dressed and spoke with a honeyed tongue, weaving words skillfully to appear generous and wise. Master, the merchant had said, I have brought the finest silk from the farthest lands. Surely a monastery as respected as yours deserves such a treasure. I offer it freely, as a token of my admiration. Lin had observed the man carefully. There was an unnatural eagerness in his voice, a glint in his eye that did not match the humility of a true giver. Sensing something was amiss, Lin did not respond immediately. Instead, he remained silent. The merchant shifted uncomfortably, but continued. Surely one who preaches kindness cannot reject a sincere gift. He placed a roll of silk before Lin and bowed deeply. Still, Master Lin said nothing. He watched as the merchant's hands fidgeted slightly, his patience thinning. The silence stretched between them like a vast, impassable river. Finally, the merchant sighed. Perhaps, he said carefully, you could return my kindness with a small favor. A recommendation to your followers, perhaps, so that they may know of my fine goods. A small smile played at the corners of Lin's lips. Now the truth was revealed. The gift was not truly a gift, but a tool for manipulation. Lin reached forward, gently touching the silk, but did not take it. A true gift is given without expectation. He said simply, yours carries a price. The merchant stiffened, then quickly recovered with a forced laugh. You misunderstand me, master. Lin met his gaze steadily. Do I? The weight of the silence that followed was unbearable for the merchant. His smile faltered, and, realizing that he had been seen for what he was, he quickly gathered his silk and left without another word. Daniel let out a slow breath, understanding dawning in his eyes. So you did not confront him, nor accuse him. You simply let silence reveal his intentions. Master Lin nodded. Silence has a way of making the truth rise to the surface. When someone tries to manipulate you, they expect a reaction. Anger, defense, compliance. But when you refuse to play their game, they are left exposed. Daniel thought for a moment, then asked, so, when faced with manipulation, the best response is to say nothing. Not always, Lin replied. But when words are used as weapons, silence is often the best shield. Speak only when your words serve clarity, not confusion. Daniel nodded, feeling a newfound strength in the idea of restraint. I will remember that, master. Master Lin smiled. Then you have already won half the battle. When you don't know the facts, 600 words, Master Lin and Daniel continued their walk through the monastery gardens. The sound of a nearby stream filled the silence between them, offering a soothing presence. Daniel, still deep in thought from their last discussion, finally spoke up. Master Lin, he asked, what if I am in a discussion where I feel pressured to have an opinion, but I don't know enough about the subject? Should I still remain silent? The old monk smiled. Ah, the temptation to speak even when wisdom calls for silence. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, when Master Lin was still a young student, he found himself among a group of monks engaged in a deep discussion about an ancient scripture. Each monk had a different interpretation of a particular passage, and they argued passionately, determined to prove their understanding was correct. Lin, eager to participate, listened carefully, but realized that he had never studied this scripture in depth. Despite this, he felt the pressure to contribute, not wanting to appear ignorant among his peers. So, when a moment of silence arose, he confidently voiced an opinion he had merely overheard from another monk. The group paused, considering his words. Then, an elder monk, who had been quietly observing, spoke. Lin, that is an interesting perspective. Tell me, where in the text do you see this interpretation? Lin's face flushed. He had no answer. He had repeated someone else's words without understanding their true meaning. Realizing this, he lowered his gaze. The elder monk's eyes were kind, yet firm. A half-truth is more dangerous than no truth at all, he said. If you do not know, it is wiser to listen and learn than to speak and mislead. From that day on, Lin made a vow to himself. He would never again speak on matters he did not understand. Instead, he would listen, absorb, and ask questions, allowing his knowledge to grow before forming an opinion. Master Lin turned to Daniel. Many people fear silence because they believe it makes them appear ignorant. But true wisdom is in knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. Speaking without knowledge not only misguides others, but also diminishes your credibility. Daniel nodded slowly, recalling moments in his own life where he had spoken without certainty, only to later realize his mistake. So, if I don't know enough about something, I should simply admit it? Master Lin nodded. Yes. There is no shame in saying, I do not know. In fact, it is a mark of wisdom. The greatest scholars, the most enlightened minds, all began by admitting their own ignorance. Only then can they truly learn. Daniel exhaled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. I think I understand now. It is better to be silent and learn than to speak just for the sake of appearing knowledgeable. Master Lin placed a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. Exactly. Knowledge comes to those who seek it humbly. So the next time you find yourself in such a situation, listen more than you speak, and wisdom will find you. When it's time to listen to yourself. 600 words. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the monastery courtyard as Master Lin and Daniel walked in silence. The air was still, and the distant sound of a wooden chime echoed through the hills. Daniel had been contemplating their previous discussion, but another question had begun to take shape in his mind. Master Lin, he said, his voice softer now. What about the times when the noise is not from others, but from within? When my own thoughts feel overwhelming. The old monk smiled and led Daniel toward a secluded garden within the monastery. A small pond lay at the center, its surface so still that it reflected the sky like a polished mirror. Let me tell you a story, Master Lin said, settling onto a nearby stone bench. When I was a younger monk, I struggled with the very thing you describe. My days were filled with duties, prayers, and teachings, but my mind was never quiet. Even in solitude, thoughts raced through my head. Worries about the future, regrets from the past, endless questions about my path. I sought answers in scriptures, in the words of my teachers, but nothing brought me peace. Daniel listened attentively as Master Lin picked up a small stone and tossed it into the pond. Ripples spread across the water, distorting the reflection of the sky. One day, Master Lin continued, my teacher found me sitting by this very pond, my mind tangled in restless thoughts. He handed me a bowl and instructed me to fill it with water from the pond and bring it back without disturbing the surface. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That sounds impossible. Master Lin chuckled. Indeed, every time I dipped the bowl, ripples formed and the reflection shattered. Frustrated, I told my teacher it could not be done. He simply smiled and said, "Then wait." The two sat in silence for a long while. Eventually, as the wind calmed and the water settled, Master Lin was able to scoop the water without disturbing the surface. When he showed the bowl to his teacher, the old man nodded. "You see, Lin, the mind is like this pond. When agitated, it cannot reflect truth. But if you allow stillness, clarity will come on its own." Master Lin turned to Daniel. "Since that day, I have learned that when the noise within becomes too great, the best thing to do is to stop seeking more answers, more distractions. Instead, I sit in silence and let my mind settle, just like the pond. And in that silence, the answers often come, not from the world, but from within." Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling a newfound understanding dawn upon him. "So when my thoughts become too loud, instead of fighting them, I should embrace silence." Master Lin nodded. "Yes. True wisdom is not found in the endless search for answers, but in the quiet recognition of what is already known. Listen to yourself, Daniel. In the silence, your heart will speak." As they sat there by the pond, Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun, the stillness of the air, and for the first time in a long while, the quiet within himself. When your ego wants to win, 600 words. The sun had begun to dip behind the monastery walls, casting a golden hue over the courtyard. Master Lin and Daniel sat beneath a gnarled fig tree, their conversation flowing with the rhythm of the evening breeze. Daniel had been silent for some time, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "Master Lin, I have one more question. What if it is not anger or frustration, but my pride that makes me speak? What if I feel the need to prove myself?" Master Lin nodded knowingly. "Ah, the pull of the ego. It is one of the greatest obstacles on the path to wisdom. Let me tell you a story." Years ago, before Master Lin had fully understood the nature of humility, he found himself in a debate with another monk, Brother Jian. The two had been discussing a passage from an ancient text, and each was convinced that his interpretation was correct. The debate grew heated, their voices rising in intensity as others gathered to watch. "I argued passionately," Master Lin recalled. "Not for the sake of truth, but for the sake of victory. I wanted to be right. I wanted others to see my knowledge and respect me for it. I did not see it at the time, but my pride had taken hold." Daniel listened intently as the old monk continued. "Then, our teacher approached. He stood silently for a moment, before placing a single teacup on the table between us. Without a word, he filled the cup to the brim, and then kept pouring. Water overflowed, spilling onto the table and dripping to the floor. Daniel furrowed his brow. "Why did he do that?" Master Lin smiled. "That is exactly what I asked him." He simply replied, "When a cup is full, it cannot hold anything new. When a mind is full of itself, it cannot receive wisdom." Daniel exhaled, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So, by clinging to our ego, we shut ourselves off from learning." "Exactly," Master Lin said. "That day, I chose silence, not because I had lost the debate, but because I realized winning did not matter. What mattered was understanding, and for that, I needed to empty my cup." He gestured toward the horizon where the last rays of sunlight stretched across the sky. When your ego pushes you to speak, ask yourself, are you speaking for truth or for validation? If it is the latter, silence is the wiser choice. Daniel nodded slowly. "So, the real victory is in letting go of the need to win." Master Lin placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Daniel. And when you do, you will find that in losing the need to be right, you gain something far greater: peace." As the monastery bells chimed in the distance, Daniel sat back and smiled, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. The monastery had grown quiet as the evening deepened. The last streaks of orange and pink faded from the sky, replaced by the first twinkling stars. Master Lin and Daniel remained seated beneath the ancient fig tree, the lessons of the day settling in Daniel's mind like the still surface of a pond after a storm. Daniel took a deep breath, his heart lighter than when he first arrived. The weight of uncertainty that once burdened him had lifted, replaced by a quiet understanding. He no longer felt the need to fill every silence with words or search for answers outside himself. Instead, he realized that true clarity often came in the stillness he once feared. "Master Lin," he said, "I came here with so many questions. I thought I needed answers from the world. But now, I see that sometimes, silence is the answer." Master Lin smiled. "You have learned well, Daniel. Silence is not emptiness. It is full of wisdom. When we embrace silence at the right moments, we gain clarity, strength, and understanding." Daniel nodded, reflecting on each lesson. "I have learned that silence in anger saves me from regret. That listening without interruption is a gift to others. That when faced with manipulation, silence allows truth to reveal itself. That speaking without knowledge leads to foolishness. That my own thoughts need silence to be heard. And finally, that the ego's desire to win is nothing compared to the peace of letting go." Master Lin's gaze softened. "These are not just lessons to know, but to practice. Life will test you, Daniel. The world is noisy, full of voices demanding to be heard. In those moments, choose to step back, observe, and let silence be your guide. Whether in conflict, uncertainty, or deep thought, allow stillness to create space for understanding before you speak. But remember, the wisest among us do not seek to overpower others with words. They listen, they observe, they respond with care." Daniel exhaled slowly, taking in the monk's words. "I will practice," he said. "I will choose my words wisely, and when necessary, I will choose silence." Master Lin nodded. "And in doing so, you will find peace, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Silence is not weakness. It is strength. It is a space where true wisdom grows." Daniel stood, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. He bowed deeply to Master Lin. "Thank you, Master, for everything." Master Lin chuckled. "You needed no teacher, Daniel. The answers were within you all along. You only needed silence to hear them." As Daniel walked away from the monastery, he carried not just the lessons of the day, but a profound shift in his heart. The world beyond was still chaotic, still loud, but he knew now that he did not have to meet its noise with more noise. He had found something far greater: the wisdom of silence. If this message resonated with you, remember to embrace silence in your own life. Let its quiet strength guide you toward clarity and peace, and may your silence inspire others to do the same. Share this wisdom with others, and if you found this story valuable, consider supporting our journey by subscribing to our channel. Let's spread peace, one silent moment at a time.